I just wanted to welcome everyone who's here to the last installment of the 6 Dimensions of Life in the New World, brought to you by CISO and MDG and sponsored by Freeman. And I think I maybe started back in week 3 saying how sad I was going to be when this came to an end, and now that day is here, so yeah. But I just wanted to say a few really quick thank yous to kind of tie a bow on this series before I hand it over to Bruce to introduce our last speaker. So first of all, I want to thank all of you who participated. You guys showed up each week during a really challenging time in your life, at least professionally. I don't know, maybe personally too, but you were here, you were supporting your peers in these roundtable discussions, you were a sounding board, a support network, a source of new ideas. And you know, what was really impressive to me is that you guys, or a lot of you anyway, are legacy organizers. And, you know, we have been kind of following roughly the same business model since, you know, our careers began. And you guys came ready to really stretch your minds and think differently about the future. So kudos to you. And I also really appreciate a lot of you gave us feedback early on about what you wanted to get out of this. So we sort of made a few tweaks as we went along, and that was really helpful as well. Thank you so much to CISO and specifically to David O'Drain, who trusted me and MGG enough to kind of let us run with this idea. Thank you to the facilitators who carved out time in their schedules each week to be here and to prepare topics to discuss and to send meaningful follow-up recaps. And the one thing I wanted to say, a lot of you have given your facilitators feedback about sort of wanting to continue this into the future and stay in touch with your networks and that sort of thing. So we are going to be sending out an email early next week about our plans, but essentially what we're going to do is kind of take a little break, and then we are going to resume this series, but with a couple of changes. First, MDG and Freeman are going to take this to CEOs and executives beyond CISO. So CISO members who want to participate can request to be in breakouts with other CISO members or with other independent organizers. I'll give you all the details on this later. But secondly, the topics are going to be a little less sort of esoteric and a bit more operationally focused. So like one week, we're going to talk about creating a business model specifically around hybrid, or 1 week, we're going to present key insights from audience sentiment research with the strategic recommendations that could come from those, that sort of thing. The whole 6-week series, and we are going to do another 6-week sprint, has been planned in advance and sort of follows a story arc that touches on virtual and hybrid and physical events. But again, I'm going to email you guys with more details on that. So if you want to participate, you can. But finally, I just want to thank Bruce for hosting this series each week and giving us access to your VIP network of friends and colleagues. And I feel like we've all just been so lucky to learn from you and to be inspired by you. And so I just want to thank you and turn it over to you to wrap it up and introduce our last speaker.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you again, David. I think it's really been a great experience for me to really, have the time with all of you over the last 6 weeks. So today we're gonna do, I think, something quite challenging for our final one. We're gonna really look at kind of, some of the challenges of our core business model as we go forward. Sadly, this is the last of the first six. And what I wanted to do is just kind of do a kind of summary of what we've done so far. We started with designing the time, not the space, really thinking about creating the most valuable time possible. Then we talked to BARB, and she introduced the science of awe and wonder, and the concept of activating the human interface and in the work that she's doing. Bruce Vaughan introduced the idea of using all the senses to create deep engagements and memories. And really kind of creating the most value possible. Sherry was a great contributor who talked about building tribes and the idea of being in the community to be part of the community. That we had to actually kind of take an active role in the tribe that we're part of. Mark talked about managing change through turmoil and making live both familiar and new. And Itamar Kubovy is joining us today. And he is really a kind of blast of optimism and fresh air. Itamar is the founder of the Five Senses Festival. And I just want to say a few words about Itamar. Itamar was the executive creative producer of the globally acclaimed dance company PILOBOLUS from 2004 to 2019. In addition to many corporate and artistic collaborations, Itamar was one of the creators of PILOBOLUS's Shadowland, which was seen by 2 million people in over 40 countries. In 2018, Itamar founded the Five Senses Festival, an international arts, food, and ideas festival on a farm in Connecticut. For the Freeman Company, the world's largest branded live events purveyor, Itamar recently co-founded Freeman Live Labs with Sherry HUSS, a network of innovators with diverse fields working together to advance live experience design and implement it at scale. Itamar lives in New York City. Welcome, Itamar.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to everyone here for allowing me to come and visit this awesome gathering.
So I'm going to show a video that will kind of, in some ways, give you a good sense of Itamar's kind of focus and production. So Itamar, tell me about live changing forever. What's happening?
So the reason I thought we should kick off with that video is because one of the things that I feel like I've been focused on now for more than a decade is really this sense, and I think you noticed it in a lot of the imagery there, on a hybrid, on the idea that the future of engagement really is about connecting stuff that's happening on screens with stuff that's happening with bodies. And that's been the effort to see how does technology and how does the sense of live and the sense of surprise really play itself out. And this led me to get interested over the course of the last several years in something that, as I think a lot of us have noticed, that things that we were sort of having in the back of our heads is like, yeah, that would be nice to learn more about, suddenly became the absolute like center of our lives overnight. And suddenly we felt like we were all in a crash course in something that we basically didn't quite understand how we were supposed to incorporate in the first place. So I come at this very much, pardon?
That's the technology of live?
Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of us suddenly moved from being in an actual brilliant at organizing people when they gathered face to face to a situation where we were supposed to figure out how to use these weird technology tools to try to do our business. And it just seemed super ridiculous. I think it was like, sure, we can do this and that, but like, that's not what we do. Mm-hmm. And so we're all kind of, you know, like flying a plane by the seat of our pants. And I think what's interesting is that I think that first and foremost, we should understand that we're all doing that. No one is doing anything other than that at the moment, and basically guessing as to how the best way is to move forward. One of the things that I learned over touring shows in 65 countries and both having things that sat down and had people come on a regular basis is that in the end, the core to everything in terms of where we're headed is just holding on to community. However we go about it, we are made up by our communities. And that's what we got. That's where the value is, whether they're spending a lot of money to come and show up or whether they're spending less money to join us online. That's a problem. And we're going to get to that problem. But ultimately, it's this group of people that we ultimately need to think is an unchangeable constant. In whatever happens, that's the prize we need to be keeping our eye on. And whatever we're doing, whether it's a live gathering or whether it's a digital or a hybrid or whatever the models are, and we're going to get to some of that today, I think the core here is you're just people dealing with people who believe you bring them something that allows them to prosper and to move forward and to be inspired. So in a way, simple, simple, simple is the only way to get through this. We hear a million snake oil salesmen and a million kind of theories about what's going to happen and when it's going to happen and how they figured it out. And the bottom line is no one knows. Let's just be real about it. No one knows. But it is an opportunity, a huge opportunity right now to try some new things. And there's also a way to think about this rationally that could allow us to hold on to almost all of our value during this period, however long it is, whether it's another 3, 4, 5 months, or whether it's another 6, 7, 8 months. We all know these numbers make us cringe every time we say them. But whichever that is, it's going to be a period where I think that the most important thing to focus on is that community and engagement in terms of what is it that makes people feel like they can maintain the relationship that you want them to have. And I think that what that means, and this is sort of where I hope our discussion goes today, is that within that community, you really have 2 different groups of people. And one of those groups of people is the group of people that you really can continue to communicate with. And you can figure out how to do that virtually. And it may not be as good, but it'll be pretty good. And you're getting what you need. You could probably grow the numbers there very, very powerfully just because you're doing this kind of virtual thing. But in the end, as we all know, everyone is running around saying, look, I got 80 million people going on live, but I brought in 10% of what I brought in with 12 people showing up, right? I mean, we're all aware of the idea that the huge inflated digital numbers don't necessarily translate into revenue in the same way that actually getting people to go somewhere in order to have a great experience and transact and learn and inspire themselves does. So part of what Bruce and I have been talking about, and I think where we're headed today, is to really break out this kind of problem of our community or challenge of our community into 2 different opportunities that would allow us right away to start thinking practically about how to organize our work, not in 2 years, not in 10 years, but really organize our work from the perspective of what we're doing over the next few months. And why don't I kind of hand it back over to Bruce here to kind of lay out a little bit of the setup and how we go about practically, actionably looking at some next steps.
So one of the things that that Itamar really introduced is a concept of deep and wide, that live is deep and digital is wide. That what you get with live is comprehensive. What you get with digital is reach. So could we think about what we do differently, where we're really activating those 2 dimensions? So, what we've done is really put together a few models of how we might do that. The first is the exclusive model, where you have radically fewer people live and huge reach digital. And you kind of work both of those dimensions. This is what it used to be like to see the Mona Lisa. I mean, awful experience, and unfortunately familiar to us. That a lot of our events have this kind of experience, which isn't really optimal. But if we start to use digital differently, we could really think about it, quite radically differently, where, you could make things differently. You could provide a different kind of access for a very exclusive group, and then have the outreach really be digital in a different way. So that was the first one. The second was the Archipelagos model, and that is simultaneous live events in many cities, so that you have in this case, small live events, but lots of them. So imagine kind of reaching into the markets that we have access to, and kind of serving those markets as best you can in a kind of TEDx model. If you think about what they were able to do by really extending their model to allow people to do it wherever they are, and it had really profound cultural impact as a consequence. And the third was a media model that is focus efforts on a live media event that makes the live event more impactful and the reach more substantial. And you can, the kind of Oscars is the kind of prime example of that. But we do it with some of our shows. This is a SEMA event for their Getting to SEMA television series. And they do a season-long effort where different car folks compete to be at SEMA.
And Bruce, I think the Oscars is worth just saying a word about, because in a funny way, you really have a situation where the broadcast of the Oscars occasions an unbelievable number of parties that are organized around that broadcast. So in a funny way, think about it. There's 5,000 people in Los Angeles. They have their own thing going on with all the networks and the advertisers and the stars and all of that. But they've managed to create an event that's interesting enough for the world that ultimately people are actually scheduling parties and tuning in and organizing their own stuff just on that broadcast model, which in a way is sort of the pinnacle of what we're talking about in a hybrid model, where there's a sort of broadcast, but there's also actually something happening for a smaller group of people that becomes incredibly exciting and interesting to be live at.
So I think that concept of deep and wide, I see this being the future of live. I mean, I don't think we're going back to the old way. I mean, what's happening with your events with your festival, with Five Senses Festival?
So what we discovered is that we really were looking at a festival where the whole idea was to bring world-class talent to a farm very casually, and to see if, instead of looking at a concert hall as the model for it, we could actually look at like down on the farm as a place to be able to still do classical music with Carnegie Hall musicians, in a with chickens running around. And how do you kind of do, hot yoga class in a cave, under the moonlight? And how do you get a rock band to work together with a dance company, to work together with a popular writer and kids to do something, that feels like it's really different from what people's experience had always been. And we found that while keeping the number low, we only had 500 attendees a day. We were able to maintain the experience as being extraordinarily high, very unique, and ultimately at a very low cost, other than just the energy we put in to making people feel like what they're doing is different from anything they've done before. But it wasn't by investing more in size or in tech, but it was about kind of a clever solution that both accommodates what we need to accommodate in terms of the restrictions on our ability to function. But we now know stuff that's outdoors, stuff that's ventilated, stuff that follows, right? And a flea market or an elegant state fair or a garden party or a tennis match happening outdoors. All of those things are different models. A wedding, a country estate. These are all sort of ideas that people have of ways they already know how to spend time outside. And is there a way that we can kind of introduce some kind of a templatized theme of one of these more normally outdoor events and figure out a way to get a lot of our business done on a more intimate scale, but with a kind of deeper experience and a deeper sort of theme running through it that allows people to feel special when they gather.
Great. Thank you, Itamar. Really, always delightful to hear you.